and welcome to our Thursday night Anam Cara Meditation program. With all my heart and with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing your sublime presence. That's your true nature, is the divine. And here you are joining us this evening and bringing the power of your practices, the power of your commitment to practice, and most importantly, your sublime divine self. So thank you for coming. And this evening we're going to be talking more about practices, and we're going to begin, of course, with the opening mantras as a practice. All practices really are for the mind. We were talking last week about the practice of the 5 remembrances and how that cultivates a kind of wisdom and knowing for the mind that helps to ease the mind. Well, all the practices in one way or another are really aimed at the mind, because it's the mind that is afflicted. It's the mind that suffers. Your true nature, it's free. It's already free, completely free. But what blocks us from knowing that is all the movements of the mind and our conditioned pattern of identification, involvement, engagement with the mind, moment by moment. So we do the practices to help ease ourselves away from the mind, to step back, right? To be able to watch it from a distance and invite it to calm, to settle, to come to know the overwhelming joy that rests in non-doing, in simply being. Poor mind is an instrument of doing, so that's a tough lesson for it. So we have to keep immersing ourselves over and over again in that stillness, of simply being. So to help us get there, we do these practices. So we're going to begin with the opening mantras. And then after we chant those, we'll just sit for a few moments in that stillness, the gift of mantra, the fruit of practice. So here we'll begin. Shri Kali Devi Ki Jai Gajananam Bhutta Ganari Sevitam Kapita Jambo Palacharu Bhakshanam Umasutam Shoka Vinashakarakam Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamudaya Purnameva Vashishate Om Shanti 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 Shri Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. So once again, with all my heart, I welcome you to our program this evening. So we're going to get into talking more about practices and the practices that support the mind coming to rest in the truth of who we are. So last week we were talking about the 5 remembrances and also doing the practice of the Heart Sutra and how these practices transform the mind. And one of the foundational truths that comes out of the meditative traditions is that differentiation between what's the truth of who we are and what's the nature of these instruments, these vehicles called mind and body. So that the fundamental understanding, the fundamental direct experience we can have is that we have a mind, but we're not the mind. We have a body, but we're not the body. Right? So the consciousness, the awareness that holds the experience of mind and body is what we're invited to shift our attention away from mind and body and into that boundlessness of awareness, the direct experience of infinitude of being. So we keep coming back to that as the key. There was a great Zen master, Soka, who lived in the late 1800s. He died in 1945. And he wrote, "Your body is not bounded by the surface of your skin, you know. The sun and the moon are in your body. The ocean and the rivers are your body. The whole universe is your body." The Buddha based his religion upon this mind, this consciousness. Sometimes you call it one body. Sometimes you call it God. We don't use that name for it in the Zen tradition. But when you observe that your mind is as boundless as the sky, an endless universe, and your present state, this moment, here, that is all. All the teachings are in your heart. They are inherent. They are the intrinsic law of your nature. You cannot find this anywhere outside of yourself. So that's what it means as we're talking about coming to rest in the truth of who we are. Whether we're looking at that through the lens of a Buddhist tradition or a yogic tradition or a Shaivite tradition, the non-dual traditions really share that fundamental understanding that the truth of who we are is all-inclusive. It includes the mind, but not limited to the mind. So we are all that is. For the mind, that's a concept. And that concept itself can get in the way because the mind gets attached to the concept and misses the experience of the reality. Right? So that's why in meditation we have to let go of everything. Everything's gone. In that spaciousness, everything disappears. What's left is that boundless, pure awareness. That we come to rest in. That, no subject and object, that pure awareness, beyond all words. So when we're talking about things, we're, just by the nature of words, talking about things that are less important than the absolute truth, our highest nature, the nature of all that is. Because that can't be put into words. That requires the direct experience. But even going into those states, whether it's through the Heart Sutra, whether it's becoming absorbed in a Maha Mantra, one of the great mantras like Om Kalima, Om Namah Shivaya, or Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Taritam Soha. Even going into that where the mantra dissolves the mind in its very source. This throb of the infinite that is who we are. And the mind is at last snuffed out in rapture. In that state, there's nothing to speak about. Coming back out, there's barely anything intelligible to speak about. So the practices aren't about that state. They're not about, well, we have to do something to that awareness, that consciousness. fully awake, fully aware, fully enlightened, fully in love. Call it what you will. That is its nature, our nature. But we do practices to help cultivate a mind that can be attuned to that living presence of our highest nature. A mind that can have the distorting lenses of our conditioned reactions, conditioned perspectives, conditioned thoughts, that the practices help purify the mind of that. Becoming immersed in the truth of who we are also does that. But we don't walk around immersed in that continuously. And so practices we can do at all those times when we're not sitting, giving ourselves the opportunity to become immersed in that until it drenches us in that awareness and we can walk it anytime, any place. So the practices are aimed at helping to support the transformation of this mind-body vehicle so that they're attuned to our highest nature. They reflect our highest nature rather than the afflicted nature of a conditioned mind. And all the traditions put a real emphasis on watching the mind. Now, one of my favorite quotes from Buddha, from the Dhammapada, is about that. He wrote, "The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care. And let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. For as surely as the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become." So becoming skillful in using this instrument of mind, knowing that thoughts, they color, change, shape our perception, then our actions, then our character, then the patterns that we keep living out moment by moment. That ability to see that and see those patterns is part of what empowers us to transform them and be free of them. And so there are various qualities that we also cultivate, just as in the 5 remembrances. There was cultivating the wisdom. Buddha was very good at spelling out, now listen, here's the reality. You're going to die. You can't avoid dying. You're going to grow old. You can't avoid illness and old age, and so forth. So the mind doesn't get caught in its fantasies of how life is going to unfold. It sees the reality and is prepared for that. So in Mahayana Buddhism, there are additional practices for also cultivating other aspects, other qualities of mind, that if we're in our highest nature, if we're in our Buddha nature or our infinite self or Christ consciousness, again, however we might refer to that by words, the state, well, it's purely virtuous. It's purely unafflicted, unlimited in itself. That's why Buddha talked about the 4 immeasurables. It's why the yogic Hindu traditions talk about the infinite of Sat Chidananda. Sat, the truth, infinite nature of being at all times, in all place. Chit, it's boundless consciousness, unimpeded consciousness. And Ananda, the rapturous, blissful nature of that awareness. When we're in that, then we would manifest this. There's no need for a practice. But the practices help both to transform the mind and then steady it. So even as we're in those states more and more, living them into the world, we have a steady vehicle to carry that state into the world. So we want to transform what's going on in the mind and the body through practice so that it remains then attuned and reflects the truth of who we are. And in the Buddhist tradition, there are 6, what are called the 6 perfections. And these are qualities that are also cultivated. Right? So one is called Dāna, Dāna paramita. Paramita is like this supreme virtue, quality. Dāna, generosity, just giving of oneself. So we cultivate that. Now, if we were in our fullness of being, of the truth of who we are, that would spontaneously express itself. Until then, we cultivate the mind and the body through actions and thoughts and contemplations and ways of seeing how can we be generous, how can we be that quality and live it into the world. Giving of ourselves. Another one of the virtues is called Śīla paramita, and it means that quality of being ethical, of being moral, of having the self-discipline that stays attuned with the highest and is seen as, oh, that's such a moral and ethical person. Well, when we've really imbibed that and really know that the spontaneous impulse from our highest nature is to live dharmically, to live in accord with that highest sense of ethics and morality. Now, infused, you can see these blend. Out of that comes generosity, right? That's a part of that. So we're cultivating these states and these qualities. And in doing so, we're also seeing when the mind gets caught in, oh, I don't want to give that to that person, or I don't feel like doing that, or I don't want to do that. I want to withhold, right? That's the limited mind, caught in its limited view, lacking a sense of the infinitude of love, of compassion, of generosity that is our nature. So the ordinary mind, in its limitations, thinks it has to protect these things. Right? It doesn't. Right? So we're cultivating that capacity to really be in the fullness of that, and again, live it into the world. Another, the third of the six perfections, is called Kṣānti paramita, and it has to do with patience and tolerance, forbearance, right? Acceptance, developing those kinds of qualities. Well, those are tremendous qualities. What a discipline. Now, this is another, now when you see that spills over into that sort of self-discipline and being ethical, being moral. Well, a lot of times that requires tremendous patience, tremendous forbearance, just steadiness of wisdom, steadiness of being in the truth that we know in the depths of our heart, the depths of our being, and then being able to live that into the world, even in the face of the most horrific kinds of obstacles. I can remember being at a presentation at a Tibetan Buddhist monk who had been held in a Chinese prison for many, many years, and the torturous experience that he had, the horrific things he was put through, and him speaking to what he was really concerned with wasn't what they were doing to his body or what they were doing to his mind, and the deprivation, the starvation, the pain, all those things being inflicted beyond what most any of us could tolerate. What that dear monk was most concerned with was being able to stay present with the patience, the kindness, the generosity towards his torturers, towards those who imprisoned him. Because that was the reflection of his deep knowing the truth of Buddha nature in himself and in all beings, even those who are inflicting suffering upon us. So extraordinary measures we can go to practice that. And in everyday life, we're given so many different ways to practice that. Whether we're dealing with what's unfolding in the world politically, what we're dealing with in terms of pandemic and the craziness of some people's behaviors around that. So many ways we're being given. Here's a time to practice. Here's a time to practice that. And bring the wisdom that you then hold into the moment, into the world. The fourth of the six perfections is called Vīrya paramita. And it has to do with the kind of energy and enthusiasm, the diligence, the vigor that we bring to our efforting in our practice. Right? Because following these kinds of disciplines isn't for just being lackadaisical. It's not for doing it intermittently. It's not about, oh, I felt like it, and then I did it. Then we're doing a different practice. We're doing the practice of just following the ordinary mind. It does what it wants to when it feels like it. We're saying, no, we do this regardless of what we feel like. We do it because we have that commitment to this practice, which is a reflection of our highest state. So if I want this vehicle attuned to my highest state, then I can't go with feeling torporous and feeling inert and not feeling like doing this and doing that. Those feelings might arise, those thoughts might arise, right? But you have a choice point because you're awake, you're conscious, you're examining things moment by moment. So it means to follow the meditative path. Right? So we're bringing that wakefulness, we're bringing that vigilance, we're bringing that effort, we're bringing the enthusiasm, that there's a delight to practice, to gaining greater mastery in the face of challenges and obstacles. That's also part of what we're cultivating in meditative disciplines and practices. The fifth of the six perfections is called Dhyāna paramita. And it has to do with being like Dhyāna. In Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyāna is one of the 8 limbs. Dhyāna is that focused, one-pointed concentration in meditation. It's one of the stages of the unfolding of meditation. Focused, one-pointed concentration. We're developing that quality. Right? That's a quality of mind. So we're developing that instrument so it has the power, the strength to do that. And we can see that. We can see that in neurophysiological terms. We can see it in research that's been done on meditators, that the circuits in the brain that have to do with attention and focus are strengthened. They're enhanced by meditative practice. Because every time when we're sitting to meditate, if we're just meditating on the breath or meditating on mantra and staying with Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om Kalima. And then the mind wanders. And then we bring it back. Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om. And then it wanders off again. Om Kalima. We bring it back. That letting go and coming back, letting go, coming back, letting go of distractions, coming back to the point of focus. That's building those attentional qualities. And we also know that in building those attentional qualities and capacities of the mind and the brain, they're then available to us anytime, any place. We can make use of that. So it's not just like, oh, that's only happens when we're sitting and meditating. No, then even when we're doing work, we can work more effectively because our mind is developing that clarity, that focus, that ability to let go of what's extraneous, what's a distraction, and stay with what you're choosing to give your attention to. Right? Choosing. That's so different than the automaticity of the mind and brain chasing after this sensation, this idea, this worry, this concern, this thing about the past, this thing about tomorrow. It just bounces around like a ping pong ball. Practice. No. Steady wisdom, steady focus, one-pointed, seeing how long we can sustain that and having that develop further and further. And the sixth of the great perfections we're familiar with because it's what's spoken about in the Heart Sutra, Prajñā paramita, this deep wisdom, this deep knowing, the Prajñā paramita, the deep wisdom of knowing the emptiness, knowing that these ephemeral forms are held in this spaciousness of unbounded awareness. Right? And even as we look at those forms arising and subsiding as is described in the Heart Sutra, as is described in many other texts, in Shaivite tradition, in the yogic tradition. We're just watching those, but we're watching from this place of extraordinary wisdom. The wisdom that says, I am free of that. I am not those heaps, those 5 skandhas, whether they're thoughts or perceptions, sensations, the limited eye awareness that goes with the ordinary mind. We're just seeing that now from the boundlessness of awareness, from Shiva nature, right? That's the auspicious one. That's our Buddha nature. That's our nature as free. Well, we're practicing that. We're also cultivating the ability of our mind to become quieter, so that that conditioned pattern of going after movements of the mind, identifying with them, and then getting caught in the net of thoughts is reduced. We're gaining freedom from it. We can see it and not be imprisoned by it. So by cultivating these various kinds of qualities, not unique to yoga and meditation, I mean, we can see these in all the great spiritual religious traditions, because they're reflections of our highest nature, or reflections of our innate living presence of God. Right? So if we want this vehicle of mind and body to be able to be at the ready, to be attuned and move from the inspiration of our own divine self, then the mind and the body have to get freed of these old patterns, these conditioned ways of just automatically engaging in the ordinary patterns of life and being in the world. We're letting him go and letting him go and letting them go. It gives us the opportunity to see then some of those patterns actually do serve. We've cultivated good patterns, but we've become identified with them. So even when there's a good pattern there, we want to be able to step back and let go of the identification with that pattern. And one of the practices that we can do in everyday life, in addition to, a seated meditation practice or keeping mantra going on in our mind throughout the day to serve as a reminder of what our true nature is. But one of the tremendous practices, and it's probably the practice that we can give the most time to, is seva, selfless service. Because in selfless service, we see all those virtues, those 6 virtues are there. That's what is informing selfless service, right? Those virtues of generosity, those virtues of being strong and energized to give, the focus, the maintaining of focus, to seeing from that space of wisdom that even while we're trying to serve, thoughts might come up that reflect attachment, that reflect sort of wrong identification. But we have that spaciousness of being and awareness that we are then empowered to be awake and choose not to go with that old pattern, but to go with a new pattern that reflects the truth of who we are. So selfless service applies to almost anything that we are doing if we're doing it as a selfless offering for the benefit of others. And being free of any attachment to the fruits of those actions. Another one of the great teachings out of the Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna was imparting to Arjuna was to be free of that attachment to the fruits of our actions. That means we give something, and then we're not looking for the pat on the back, the recognition, the text that says, "Oh, thank you, that was so wonderful." I mean, all the things that you can see in everyday life, we are conditioned to expect, want, feel disappointed if we didn't get it. All these things, we don't think of them, but they're the 10,000 threads that bind us, right? A single thread may not have much strength, but if you take a spool of even the thinnest thread and wrap it around thousands of times, you're bound, hand and foot. So these simplest little patterns that catch us about being identified, being caught. Now the world isn't going to reflect back to us that those are binding us. The world is saying, no, of course you should expect that. No, that person, they should have thanked you. They should have thrown flowers at your feet for what you did. Yeah, we can understand that. But in sadhana, we're looking for a different level of freedom and a different kind of joy than the joy that just comes from those momentary, ephemeral pieces of recognition or gifts from others. We want the eternal. We want the eternal. We want the fullness of the boundless joy, the boundless wisdom, the boundless love, the boundless compassion that is our nature. And if we get identified with these little patterns, each one of them is pulling us away from the truth of who we are. We have to let them go, let them go, let them go. So that selflessness in the moment that we can bring throughout the day, and the many ways that we can engage in that, but it becomes a critical practice. Right? In fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, it is critical to serve others, to contribute actively to others' well-being. He said, I often tell practitioners that they should adopt the following principle. Regarding one's own personal needs, there should be as little involvement or obligation as possible. But regarding service to others, there should be as many possible involvements and obligations. This should be the ideal of a spiritual person, said the Dalai Lama. Because it takes our attention away from our little self. At the end of satsang last week, one of our Sangha members, Court, was talking about noticing as you observe the mind, how self-involved the mind is. How at root it's so narcissistic. It's all about itself. What is it feeling? What is it thinking? What does it want? What does it not want? What does it like? What it doesn't like? What's in it for me? It's completely wrapped up in itself. That self-craving, that self-involvement, right? That's part also of what we let go of through everyday acts of selflessness, of putting others' needs above our own, of acting selflessly, of looking around the world. There's countless needs. Matter of fact, it can be overwhelming to see the needs of the world. We take a look at the political landscape. We take a look at the landscape of the pandemic. We take a look at the economic landscape and inequities. Right? There are tremendous needs everywhere for us to give and engage in. Right? Yes, we need some time and energy to take care of ourselves, as Dalai Lama said. Yes, there are those. But that's also in part to give us the strength to know that we can tap into this boundlessness of generosity, this boundlessness of compassion, right? Not the poor little ego minds going, I can only generate so much and then I get overwhelmed and burnt out. That's understandable. That's the mind trying to do it all on its own. Coming to home to the truth of who we are fills us with an energy and a power, right, that we can then bring to being in service of others. Right? By being awake and aware and being able to see the pain and the affliction in the world without being overwhelmed. Right? Overwhelm comes also out of ignorance. Not knowing the fullness of who we are, the fullness of all, the fullness of this whole creation held in the infinite's embrace. So you can see how these kinds of wisdom practices and these cultivation of kind of virtues, these innate qualities really, they're innate to the truth of who we are. But the mind is practicing them until it kind of has more and more that steady wisdom of abiding in the fullness of the truth of who we are. That it's transformed our vision so we can see that at all times, in all places, including when we look in the mirror. It's a great practice. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Look right into your own eyes and say, God sees God looking at God. That's all there is. God sees God looking at God. Same works for Buddha. Look in the mirror and say, Buddha sees Buddha looking at Buddha. Come home to the truth of who we are. Then we can walk that into the world. So the meditative practices, when we really step aside, give ourselves that time to, with the eyes open, eyes closed, but that complete letting go. But that's to inform. That's to empower us to then hold what we know and what we experience of that fullness in meditation into the world. All times, all places. That's what the virtues are talking about in terms of that vigilance, that one-pointedness. Not here and there, once in a while, when I feel like it. No, all times, all places. And that's what it means to be awake. That's what Buddhist simply means awake. So to be fully awake and aware to the nature of life, the nature of emotions, the nature of death, awake to joy and suffering, to love and compassion, awake to our infinite, radically free nature. That's what cultivating these qualities and doing the practices of diving into the boundlessness of meditation, that's what empowers us to walk in the world awake. Only one who is awake can steer the vehicle of the mind and body in the direction of boundless joy, compassion, wisdom, and love. Those who are asleep, caught in anger, fear, jealousy, envy, hatred, they're like unconscious drunks driving their cars at full speed into other unconscious drunks, driving their cars along the highway of life and creating extraordinary suffering along the way. That's what it is to drive this vehicle through life, unconscious, unaware, asleep. So the path of meditation is the path of wakefulness. Wakefulness to the truth of who you are and who everyone is. Walk with awareness, fully awake, and your every step can be one of freedom and peace. Breathe with awareness, fully awake, and your every breath can lead to freedom. Eat with awareness, fully awake, and with every mouthful you can savor your Buddha mind. Drink with awareness, fully awake, and with every sip, you will taste the joy of true peace. Move through the world with awareness, fully awake, and you will bring the blessings of love and compassion to all you encounter. Only one who is awake and free, only one who is awake and free can choose the way of love in every moment. That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to know. That's what we're called to live. So the doing mind gets transformed. The doing mind learns it can come to rest in infinite being, be infused with these boundless qualities, and then live them into the world. The Dharma of the mind is to live Dharma into the world. The spaciousness of being, the freedom of boundless love and compassion. That's our calling. And so now, to help the mind enter that state and live in that state, we're going to be chanting the mantra, Om Kalima, Kali Namo Nama, Om Kalima, Kali Namo Nama. Kali, the great mother, the source of that boundless love, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom and grace, flows through her portal into this world. The portal is you. She took your form to live this love and wisdom into your life. You are her. You've never been anything else. Be awake to that and live that love and joy and delight into life. So now we'll chant, and then after the chant, we'll just sit in the stillness, rest in that divine embrace. If the mind moves, and just embrace it with mantra. Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om Kalima. The loving vibrations and sound and power of consciousness that's taken the form of that mantra envelop the mind in her gifts. Shri Mata Kali Devi Ki Jai. Om Kali Ma Kali Namo Namah. So we end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. So coming to rest in the truth of who we are, who all beings, who all creation is. Transforming the mind along the way, so it's a vehicle that can carry your boundless nature, your boundless love, your boundless wisdom, your boundless compassion, your steadiness of equanimity, that it can carry these and be of service to those qualities as you walk them into the world, to everyday life. So thank you for being ones who do these practices, who have this commitment and strength, and are doing what can be done to transform this world. Living the truth into the world. So thank you. And thank you for bringing the power of your practices to this evening, sharing it with the Sangha, sharing it with the world. And thank you for the many ways that you support Anam Cara and what we offer, a safe refuge. There's so much turmoil going on in the world, in everyday life, to have a safe refuge we can come to and share the truth with one another, to support and uplift one another, to inspire, to embrace one another. So thank you. Thank you for coming and supporting us in making these offerings available to everyone. So I look forward to seeing you next week.